to a special episode of The Voice of Insurance, produced in association with Beazley. Deep down, we all know that innovation isn't just a buzzword. It's really a matter of long-term survival. It's getting increasingly difficult to argue against the idea that the speed of change keeps accelerating. And we now live in a world where what was science fiction only 20 years ago could soon become the norm. For instance, who would have guessed that the majority of our growing energy needs are going to be almost entirely met by novel green production methods within the next 25 years, perhaps even including scaled-up nuclear fusion within the mix? Who would have imagined that commercial exploitation of space would become ever more economically viable, including the possibility of space-based manufacturing and lunar habitation? In such an environment, a failure to innovate means that not only will your company stagnate over time, but better run, more innovative competitors might take an unassailable lead over you. In a world where progress is being measured in giant revolutionary leaps, a culture of small, incremental improvements on what we've already got might not quite cut it. So, if innovation is imperative and we all want to do more of it, we all need to learn how to do this more radically and at a greater speed and scale than ever before. This is clearly not something that can be left to chance. This begs the question of whether there's a way of bottling up and distilling what the most innovative companies and business units do, so we can try and be more like them. And that's what this special episode's all about. For one, is there such a thing as an innovation mindset or methodology? And more importantly, can we capture it, codify it, and embed it throughout large and complex organisations? To explore this and the major upcoming engineering, technological, financial and intellectual challenges of the next 2 decades, I'm joined today by a stellar lineup of guests from Beazley and wider industry. We'll hear from Adrian Cox, Beazley's CEO, Neil Kempston, Head of Incubation Underwriting, and Denis Bonsoussan, Head of Space. I'll also talk to Rob Grant, Managing Director and Head of the Global Projects Group at Pollination, a specialist advisor and investor in the energy transition, who's here to give us an external perspective. Let's start with Adrian Cox. For Adrian, innovation is a systemic endeavour that he understandably wants to foster and nurture across his organisation.
So just like most things, although some people ascribe things to instinct or luck or fortuity in some way, I think you can get more of that if you put a process behind it. And I think the same applies to innovation. If you apply yourself to doing it in a systematic way, you're more likely to be successful at it. I think that's true.
Adrian highlighted the importance of a systematic approach, and he distinguished between 2 types of innovation: contiguous and brand new. Contiguous innovation refers to adjacent developments building upon existing products or services. This is often easier to achieve, as new opportunities naturally arise in the specialty insurance world where new risks constantly emerge from existing classes.
So cyber emerged from tech E&O. We had what we call virtual care, which emerged from miscellaneous medical and the growth of the telemedicine industry. We had Safeguard, which is our physical abuse product, emerge from employment practices liability.
But we all know that people do things because they're incentivised to do so. Adrian acknowledged that sensibly designed incentives definitely play a role.
If you reward your risk takers for taking risk intelligently, that stuff will more naturally happen.
So it's definitely nothing to do with luck. It's all about design.
Who was it? Was it Arnold Palmer that was accused of being very lucky? The harder I practice, the luckier I get. I think it's the same sort of thing, really, isn't it?
So is it really down to creating a methodology, saying, right, we want to innovate, so therefore we're going to do thing number 1, then we'll do number 2, and then if that doesn't work, we'll do number 3? Is it almost having something written down and saying, well, okay, we'll try this, and instinctively, which one we'll follow it up in a more scientific way?
To that point, we discovered that projects that were done to the side of your desk where underwriters were doing their normal job and doing research into other things tended to drag on a bit. So we brought in some specific resource that could help with product development, some wordings and research and all the rest of it, just so these things can kind of move on a bit more quickly than they would do by themselves.
By the way, Adrian was right. The quip about practice making you luckier is a famous quote from Arnold Palmer, the great golfer of the 1960s. However, the real challenge lies in that brand new innovation we mentioned at the beginning, i.e. the kind that isn't just an iteration of something you already do.
I think the brand new is more difficult because the risks are less well known and understood. and risk takers are less likely to want to take on that exposure themselves if they have to take the upside and downside risk, the downside risk in particular. And so we had to think about that slightly differently in Beazley, which is why we started our incubation unit, which I think you've interviewed Neil already. He runs that, and that allows us to experiment in a controlled manner into new products and new risks where people aren't exposing their own business units to the real unknown.
This incubation unit is crucial for exploring emerging risks without exposing the core business to undue uncertainty. Adrian likens this approach to that of a venture capitalist, acknowledging a high failure rate but banking on significant returns from the experiments that are successful.
And that's partly what the incubation unit does. You're expecting a relatively high failure rate in something that's brand new or nascent. And we've had lots of things go through there. Most of them don't work, but some of them do. And that's what it's for.
I think that it's clear that the first thing we've learned today is that if you really want innovative new product development to accelerate, you need to allocate dedicated resources to that end. A structured approach combined with rewarding intelligent risk-taking helps normalise innovation as part of your culture, rather than something scary or separate. Adrian said it should be part of what you are and what you do to experiment a bit and try to figure out where you can take your product next. This also extends to hiring, where companies should look for natural curiosity as an asset in prospective employees. It's time to hear from Neil Kempston, who runs Beazley's dedicated innovation resource, the incubation unit. I asked Neil what exactly was the role of his team.
There's a lot of different choices you can make when you pick the title for this kind of function. And one of the ones that was explored when this was being dreamt up and put together as a strategy way back before 2020 was innovation is a route to achieve stuff in insurance, and that is a way to describe it. But what we wanted to do at Beazley is recognise that we have expertise across the group who are very busy. And because they're very busy, that means they're deploying that expertise on something that they're very good at. And what our team can do is provide the upfront work to discover, to go through the design and testing and stressing process for a new product, but then also underwrite it and scale it, incubating it until it's ready for them to take forwards. So what we're here to do is to provide them with new products so that we can go through this changing cycle of activity to give them more tools in their toolbox in the future.
So the team steps in when core business units are too busy with their day-to-day responsibilities to devote time to speculative new product development. It's a specialised role designed to ensure innovation actually happens, rather than relying on passion projects. But how does the firm measure success?
We're measured on taking products through our process effectively. So if we have an opportunity that comes our way that isn't the right fit for Beazley for a very good reason, we will take it through our process and we will decline it and thank whoever brought that idea to us and give them an articulated and clear reason as to why it's not the right fit for us. It could be not the right fit for us right now. It could be not the right fit for us because of the broader Beazley strategic appetite and our ability to service that solution.
Neil explained that focusing solely on the number of projects launched could provide the wrong incentives. Instead, the goal is to apply the methodology consistently. I asked Neil where all these new ideas come from.
Everywhere. So we'll get things directly from underwriting teams who could have had it brought to them by a broker. They could have seen an opportunity themselves that they want to develop and bring to the fore, but they aren't resourced to be able to support that, to bring it operationally to life, but then also to take it through a test period, because the early years of a product can be more challenging as you learn a lot in that period. That's one side. We get direct outreach from brokers directly to our team as we sit. We're lucky to have a good brand that provides us with a good representation of the innovation that we put out there more broadly, which means we attract interest from brokers, but also directly from potential MGAs, insurtechs. We're active participants in the Lloyd's Lab, where we're mentoring different organizations through different cohorts. Lots of different places, different industry bodies we're part of, inside and outside of insurance as a group as well.
The team sees between 1 and 5 new ideas a week, highlighting the sheer volume of opportunities and the necessity for a rigorous prioritisation process. Neil describes a multi-stage pathway from ideation to assessment and launch. A key part of the assessment is determining buyer urgency, not just market size.
So we do have a series of decision gates between each one. So we have the kind of ideation stage, which is where just collecting information. We have the assessment stage where we look at that product. We're trying to understand what the kind of crucial opportunity looks like. Very consistently, we ask a very specific set of questions, which is, what is the addressable market? How truly big is the addressable market? But that's not the only answer to that part of the question. We have to understand the buyer urgency, and does that exist? Because while there can be a giant market, do the buyers need it now?
This process also includes formal governance with underwriting and executive committees, ensuring buy-in and assessment from risk, compliance, and conduct perspectives. The launch phase typically involves a pilot to understand how the product works. The process adapts to different risk types. For shorter tail risks, incubation might be quicker, typically between 1 and 3 years. Longer tail solutions, however, require more time to mature. Neil explains that the team is disciplined, even winding down solutions that haven't scaled, despite market interest. And what about the concept of failing fast? I asked if this was an awkward idea to embrace within such a naturally conservative industry as insurance, where we tend to prefer to project an air of solidity and stability.
Failure for me is losing learning. So if we've launched a product, we've done all the right things, we've really tested it, we've gone out and spoke to tens or hundreds of clients, we've captured all of that information, and then we bury it somewhere and never to be found again, that for me is failure, because we can launch the right product at the wrong time. So if it's a consecutive hard market again and again and again on compulsory lines, the purchasing capability of risk managers is depleted. When things change, then there's more opportunity to try new solutions, to see them work, to go through the claims process. All that kind of good stuff will give the right time and the right chance to grow these things. So people use the word, have you killed a product? We would never kill a product. What we would do is put it in storage, so that learning can either be used to reformulate that solution to something that makes sense for maybe a different market or a different time, or to take that learning and apply it to our existing products or to a brand new product.
Neil's approach directly challenges the natural conservatism of the industry, which isn't used culturally to any idea of failure, let alone failing fast. For Neil, a failure, as long as it leads to learning, is actually a success. Lessons, as long as they are studied and learned and not lost, will enable the business to grow and evolve. Another challenge Neil's team addresses is cross-class ideas, where a new risk might span multiple traditional lines of business. The incubation unit acts as a neutral ground to test these out and determine the best fit for future ownership within Beazley's specialist product teams. Here's an exchange on the topic with Neil.
It's a common feature that innovative ideas are often cross-class. And is that somewhere where you can add value? Because, of course, you are a third place where this thing can go and actually can... Because otherwise, perhaps if you left it alone, one department might say, well, this is a property risk, but the other one might say, well, it's more of a political risk. And then, of course, never the 20 will meet. And then 20 years later, they'll still be arguing about who should be doing it. Whereas, of course, we can give it to Neil and he'll do it.
Well, yes and no. So, yes, in that my team can lead us down the path to identify where's the best fit for that from a line perspective in the future, because as an incubating team rather than a holding forever team, there's got to be an onwards ownership if we think there's legs to the solution, whether we think there's a growth potential, we think there's a performance potential. So we have to have someone bought in from the underwriting side to take it forwards. What we can do is move that from a conversation to a test. And we can do that through building a portfolio, through putting together the wordings, through going through the claims process to understand those different bits and pieces, so that when we get there, we can help facilitate that. Now, my team, we've done cross-class solutions, so we're able to do that in different ways. And so, yes, we can provide that solution, but we always link it back to Beazley's broader strategy of being product specialists. And so what we can do is determine where that specialist can be. We do a lot of that learning. We stay in contact throughout the whole process with the underwriting team that we're aligned with. And it could be teams. It could be underwriting teams. So we stay aligned with both or more teams so that they're aware of all the learning that we're going on as resource efficient process for them as we can do.
I then asked Neil about his team's relationship with technology. It certainly seems that as more and more data becomes available, this is allowing us to get a handle on pricing and the calculation of expected losses in novel areas that are so new that they don't yet have a track record. Tech, including AI, is becoming increasingly useful.
So I think to your point around modelling, it makes that process faster. It was always possible but incredibly difficult before. So you'd have to go and get the data, get the right sort of actuarial resource to be able to assess it, to go through all of that process. And a lot of the time it'd have to be done completely in-house without any third party doing that and showing their value. In terms of bringing new products to bear, absolutely. Finding ways to use data that couldn't be used before to create solutions that everyone thought was impossible, we've seen that happen. It's absolutely happened in the market. And it's a way to storm a march on everybody else where everyone says, oh, you can't do that.
AI and advanced analytics assist in better risk selection and pricing for existing products, as well as enabling new product development. Yet despite all the technological advancements, Neil emphasised that the fundamental spirit of boldness and intelligent risk-taking, the why not attitude, remains essential. This systematic approach to innovation is particularly critical when addressing complex, multi-year projects that often lack historical data, a common characteristic in the transition to green energy. I asked Adrian how we should navigate these uncharted waters, especially with customer demand for long-term commitments from day one.
Yeah, and it's often insuring technology that's new or things that are new, right? And that's certainly risky. New technology has always been difficult to underwrite. It goes wrong more frequently, doesn't it? And so the engineering class and the construction classes are riddled with new technology that's gone wrong, and those losses can tend to be quite severe. And we've seen that with renewable energy over the years, with wind farms way back when, and solar dealing with cat risk, and more recently battery farms dealing with fires.
Adrian highlighted the need for insurers to be involved from the very beginning, collaborating with clients, banks, and even governments to define what is insurable. This is also evident in new areas like carbon capture.
When you think about carbon capture and storage, for example, and storing carbon under the sea, there are some conversations going on right now between regulators and energy companies about how long the energy companies have to keep the leakage liability risk. So what should the government take on its balance sheet, and what and for how long should the companies keep on their own balance sheet, and how much of that is insurable versus not?
The perils here are multifaceted. From an asset loss of sequestered carbon, which is a bit like a property loss, to significant pollution and liability exposures. Adrian explains that early engagement is key to getting the balance right and determining what levels of coverage are feasible. The rule of thumb being that the greater the material uncertainty, the lesser the policy period an insurer can offer.
One of the good things I think about transition risk in particular is there are live conversations going on now between energy companies and banks and insurers and governments about figuring out who takes what risk and what is appropriate. And, in the past, insurers have often come in at the last minute and being told this bit's yours. And we're like, oh, well, we don't really want to do that. So at least we're in the room having these discussions now, which is helpful.
This proactive engagement helps make new projects, particularly in green energy, investable by giving relief to the debt and equity capital required to get a scheme off the ground. Adrian noted that Lloyd's significant ability to syndicate risk is crucial for bringing meaningful solutions and capital to these complex problems.
Lloyd's has great convening power across the insurance industry, but as you say, it's the biggest syndicated market that there is. And so when you collaborate that way, you can bring some quite meaningful solutions to some problems that do need real capital to solve.
Adrian also mentioned Beazley's involvement in nuclear fusion, listing the wide range of risks involved.
It's the machinery and plant construction risks. You've got property and physical damage risks. You've got workers' compensation risks. You've got performance guarantee risks. You've got credit risks, and you've got liability risks. So there's all sorts of stuff going on there.
Building a plant like this has never been done before, so one assumes that the construction techniques are also untried.
Yes, certainly.
At that scale, anyway.
And there's a risk of a nuclear incident. It's very different with a fusion plant than a fission plant. I think the extent of the damage is less, but it's still certainly a major exposure. We've been working since the beginning of last year with the SMI fusion force to try and figure out how we can help, what is insurable, how all the regulation would work. And actually our experience in the space sector has helped because there are some parallels there with who should be taking what sort of risk. It's super interesting.
As Adrian mentioned, Beazley's experience in the space sector has perhaps surprisingly provided parallels for allocating risks in fusion projects. To delve deeper into ensuring cutting-edge technologies and managing extreme uncertainty, I spoke to Denis Bonsoussan, Beazley's head of space. And the funny thing about space, of course, is it's by definition hugely innovative because, of course, how do you insure something that you put it up in space and then you may be very, very hard to go up and fix it? So you can't just send someone with a van up in space to fix your satellite, and you want to get things right first time. Really interesting problems that need to be solved by insurance. The first hurdle to get over tends to be the lack of experience that we have of this activity. Someone's asking you to insure something that hasn't been insured before. What's the mindset? How do you start to insure things that don't have any experience, that don't have any loss record?
That's the difficulty of underwriting a class like space. There was no precedent for space. So when the commercial age of space started, that was the time when insurance was required. Before that, and the start of the commercial age for space was roughly at the end of the 60s with the first communication satellite. Everything has to be invented, basically, in terms of insurance, because there was no precedent, and most of the space activity which have gone on before were from states, and states usually don't need insurance. So there were very few data at the time, and people used the experience from aviation and prior to that from marine as well. So the first solution for insuring satellite were derived from what was available for ships and for commercial airline.
So early space policies were initially adapted from aviation and marine insurance. However, with the industry's growth, insurers became wiser and adapted policies to meet specific need, and eventually evolved to become the key to unlocking finance for space projects.
Today, insurance is main enabler of space project. Without insurance, you don't have finance, and those space projects required a lot of capital, and you have banks and institutional loaner which are requiring insurance in order to protect their investment and their loans. So insurance is a requirement, and without insurance, you don't have a project and you don't have the capital to develop it.
Insurance quickly became one of the largest budget items for space projects, alongside launch and building costs. The technology in space never stops evolving. This necessitates the highest reliability, which insurance aims to cover. So, what are the key lessons learned from insuring an industry like this?
You have to be able to deal with uncertainty, and you have to be able to deal with low sample. So basically, all of that is counterintuitive to the principle of insurance, where usually profitable insurance underwriting is using a very large sample, having good model that's going to give you a reduced level of uncertainty, and you know what roughly is going to be your level of claim. Once you know your level of claim on any given year, you're going to be able to measure how much profit you want for this class of business, and that would drive your price and your appetite. Here for space, but that's also valid for other very innovative class. You're facing two main hurdles. One is a very low volume of risk, so a very low sample. So the law of great number doesn't apply. So basically, model don't really apply. And again, it's very difficult to find models because you don't have really homogeneity in the type of risk you're insuring. I like to say that every satellite or every rocket is built by hand.
So no two of them are really quite the same.
Absolutely. It's like building a Ferrari, essentially. It's built by hands. It requires about 2 years to build a satellite, and every single satellite is very different and made in a bespoke way according to the requirement of the buyer.
So each satellite is bespoke, making it difficult to find patterns for traditional models. And what's more, the evolution of technology is very fast, meaning that a satellite launched today would contain significant innovation compared to one launched even 2 years ago. So what's the solution?
Again, I think the idea is to have a disciplined approach. And the disciplined approach, I think, is based on two elements. One is really understanding the technical parameter of the risk you're insuring and what are the real pain points and requirements of the insured. In order to get really into the technical assessment of your risk is understanding the weakness and the strength and asking the right question and be able to access the right amount of information which allow you to make educated assessment.
It's what insurance has always done. Be disciplined in examining new risk, but also in your individual exposure to that risk. So, to meet the capital requirements of major projects, a pooling of resources is essential.
For space, today, Probably 50% of the space market capacity is reinsurers. So direct insurers are contributing 50%, and 50% at least is reinsurance. So there is effectively a pooling of resources that allow people sharing capital and sharing their appetite in a way which allow all projects to be covered.
Linking back to what Neil said earlier, artificial intelligence is also beginning to play a significant role.
I think technology is definitely helping today in two ways. One is for manufacturers. I think manufacturers are increasingly using AI to either use the best design or the design which have been proven to be successful, and having AI allow you to access a much larger quantity of data, and also being able to see patterns that humans wouldn't be able to see or not as efficiently. So manufacturers are definitely relying more and more on AI, and there is definitely ways where AI could be used to improve again the reliability and the performance. So we're seeing that happening, and we're also seeing AI being used by operator of satellite in a way, for example, collision avoidance in orbit. Everybody has heard about the low orbit being more and more congested. And I think AI is definitely helping in terms of collision avoidance. So the risk of having collision in orbit, creating more debris, I think this risk is being managed today in a much better way and is becoming less scary using AI. That contributes to making the space environment more benign from a risk point of view. And also from our point of view as insurers, I think we have access to a huge amount of technical data and technical engineering data. I think within the limit of what we could share with AI and within the limit of confidentiality agreement that we have in place, I think AI could definitely help in terms of helping us to manage the huge amount of data, getting to the critical areas and be able to see patterns as well. So I think there is definitely a benefit. This is starting to appear. I expect the coming years to see a much bigger influence of AI within our business.
So AI is helping to build better satellites and making them less likely to crash into one another. I then asked Denis about Beasley's work on nuclear fusion, which is something he's directly involved in. The project draws some fascinating parallels with the early days of space exploration.
It came sort of naturally to me because there is a lot of commonality between fusion and space. Fusion is probably where commercial space was 50 years ago. Very beginning, people didn't really see application for space in day-to-day life. People were skeptical about what the future could bring in terms of general public application. People were used to see rocket being launched by the Russian, by the US, but that was all very distant for the common people and for taxpayers. And that's exactly the same today for fusion. Fusion is using a lot of the technological achievement that have been made possible by space. And fusion today is where it is, and people are talking about fusion today increasingly because, for once, most of the technological blocks have been removed. So we know how to produce fusion reactor. We know how to manage the thermal element, which has always been a big hurdle to fusion power production. We know how to manage fusion reactors as well, and that's all thanks to the achievement of the space exploration. Thermal issues have always been one of the main elements for space assets, not only for ascending to space, where the amount of energy and the thermal requirement, for example, in rockets are enormous, and you need to elaborate new materials to be able to support those very high temperature and high pressure. Magnets, which is a key technology for fusion, are also being developed for space application, and computing. Today, the management of all those thermal and magnetic interaction are being made possible by high advance in terms of computation. For example, when you see Elon Musk and SpaceX being able to land a rocket, literally, this is made possible by all the improvement in computation, which allow microsecond management of navigation for those rockets, and which are basically able to manage millions of parameters in real time. And that's what you need to manage the thermal flux within the fusion reactors. Now, the challenge for fusion is to scale up.
So space technology is showing the way for fusion to be able to become commercially viable. And as we should all know by now, the role of insurance in fusion is similar to its role in any other commercial activity, making it more easily investable and addressing the public perception of the risk. Denis also clarified that fusion is inherently safer than fission.
I think insurance wants to be one of the first mover into fusion because, again, it would bring comfort to investor, and that's what required to enable the business to scale up and start producing in mass. And second thing, it will also help to clear regulatory hurdle and also the general public. If you know that an activity is going to be insured, that give more comfort to the general public. It's 100% cleaner. There is no waste. The only waste is water or water vapor. There is no possibility of any explosion in the way that the nuclear fission scenario, there is no meltdown.
So fusion is safer and cleaner, like having a little sun on the Earth. The primary insurance products considered for fusion include construction, property damage, machinery breakdown and third-party liability. There's also demand for long-term performance guarantees akin to those offered for satellites.
Investor, especially at this scale of capital, need some sort of comfort in terms of future performance. And what is required for insurers is to step in and accept the transfer of risk to them, to their benefits as expert. And what is being required at the moment and what is probably being the most challenging aspect of insurance contribution to the development of fusion is performance, providing performance guarantee that's going to allow capital provider to invest into the development of fusion reactor.
Denis highlighted that the insurance industry has experience with performance guarantees for renewable energy and for satellites, where continuous performance can be insured for 15 years. Looking further into the future, Denis sees vast opportunities in space exploration beyond Earth's orbit.
There are lots of new applications dealing with space exploration at the moment, which are, again, at the verge of emerging. One of them is the moon. I think we're going to see in the next few years a flurry of activity on the moon. Having access to the moon is going to be a game changer. Being able to manufacture in space as well, I think that's also the next thing. Again, all the technological block have been completed, and now it's just a question of generating enough capital to launch those facilities in space. I think there is a vision to outsource all the heavy industry which are polluting, which are complicated on Earth, and to outsource that to outer space. And that's today it's made possible by technology. Effectively, you see a point where a lot of the heavy industry is going to be outsourced to space.
A lunar space market. You heard it here first. With manufacturing, biotech, chips and cables 100 times more efficient in space than on Earth, and the banishment of polluting industries to outside our atmosphere, the developing space economy is clearly going to keep Denis extremely busy. Our final guest today, Rob Grant, brings a unique perspective as someone who has spent a long and successful C-suite career developing, financing and operating renewable energy projects. Pollination Group is a climate change advisory and investment business with major backing from financial institutions.
We have got a focus on climate, nature and carbon, and really have come here to do the principal investment area of work or utilising the balance sheet of Pollination to originate and develop projects in what we call the hard to abate sectors. And that's really outside the decarbonisation of the electricity system.
I asked Rob what opportunities he was most excited about.
I'm most excited in the first instance that we now have the economies of scale in manufacturing of renewable energy technologies and the resulting economics causing the energy transition to be predominantly an economic one now, with decarbonisation as a byproduct.
Now that renewable energy, particularly solar and wind, is cheaper than fossil fuel production, this is making the long-term switch to renewables an effective business certainty. But this rapid change and the democratisation of energy production is creating the need for a more distributed and complex power grid.
Now we've got this amazing democratisation of energy that renewable energy has allowed, particularly solar, where the grid connected and utility scale renewables is dispersed, and it's in a lot of communities and a lot of regional areas. And at the residential level, particularly in Australia, it's a high level of penetration. And that is giving, for the first time, consumers the choice about being generators, users, and storers of energy all within their household. And technology and some regulation is really unlocking all of that.
Rob explained that the efficiency and reduced cost of wind and solar, along with the development of lithium-ion batteries, is creating a trifecta of bankable technology, high gearing and insurable assets. Rob also emphasised the crucial role of insurers in understanding and advocating for climate science, given their direct exposure to its impacts.
The industry needs to and does speak out about that risk, because there's a lot of political dogma and weird views about the science that plays out in a lot of discussion globally about do we or don't we have climate change, and therefore do we or don't we need to do anything. The numbers don't lie. So clearly losses are increasing as a consequence of the impacts of climate change weather events, and understanding those by the industry that suffers or benefits the most first is a really important role to play.
Rob's here representing our customers, so from his perspective, what are project developers and their backers looking for from their insurers in this evolving landscape?
As a project developer, as a renewable energy independent power producer, we needed to be producing projects that were institutional capital, be it debt or equity, investment ready and insurable. I mean, I think that's the other aspect. If you want to maximize your returns, you then use technologies that are bankable. If it's bankable, you can get high gearing. The banks want wraps around everything, both on delivery and operations. A large part of that sits in insurance, both for on time and on risk/budget delivery, and then through ops, managing business interruption and other outage risk.
So there's a huge amount insurers can do. In the first place, be crystal clear on what's insurable and what isn't, and then provide all the delivery, performance and operational covers to allow banks and equity investors to maximise their impact and returns on capital. Rob sees the energy system of the future as one with highly diversified generating assets, geographically spread out and connected to millions of households. While this offers diversification at a physical production level, making it better in terms of risk profile, it also introduces new risks that insurers could help with, particularly related to technology and cybersecurity.
At a physical production level, much, much better, but it's unlocked through technology. So the ability to have that diversification and the smartness of that grid is a technology-driven. So if you think about the distribution company typically having a relationship physically with you at your meter box, that's the point they connected, and behind the meter box, you basically, it was all you were private and you did what you liked and the grid just provided you dumb electrons. The distribution company should now be able to think about, and with the support of the owner, to say, well, I want to come behind your fuse box and your distribution box, and I want to see how your EV is charging and when we should charge it and when we can discharge it, and maybe we should turn off your pool pump or your heat pump just for the peak period in the grid. That's all unlocked through the Internet of Things and the smartness of the demand side. But that's clearly a big impost for the cybersecurity and other technology aspects of the industry, which are risks emerging. And I guess insurers deal with areas like that that have always had high cyber risk, and bringing that learning across to our industry as we start to really integrate with the household level. At the millions of customer scale is going to be really interesting.
So watch out for much greater localised exposures and a major increase in institutional demand for cyber products as utilities get into a much more intimate relationship with their customers. Rob also said that parametric insurance is becoming increasingly valuable to the power sector to help with the financial consequences of unexpected fluctuations in supply and demand.
Opportunities for things like weather insurance and seasonal events that you can then utilise as a way to contract that 5-minute energy. So if you want to write a longer term contract into a forward period for your energy production from a wind farm that's based on average wind over that period, and then it comes in under. That's definitely a place for, and we do see some of that insurance. And that's always just got to be a better alternative than just going into the market and buying the energy and selling it into the contract relative to the premium on the insurance policy.
So insurers can play a role by taking away the financial consequences when weather deviates from the norm. But now it's time for a reality check. What could insurers be doing better? Here, Rob expressed the most common frustration with insurers. Inconsistency, particularly after a big event.
And I think it's down to the relationship, people, culture. I think insurance, like any industry, culture is kind of critical to performance of the business, and bringing the right culture to an organisation is the thing that gets the extra ounce of discretionary effort from teams, and that's really what creates competitive advantage. And presumably in insurance land, that's what enables you to do the analysis or put the time in to understand a new insured, or to stick with a current insured even though there's an event, and work with them on spreading out that recovery over a longer period rather than just dropping altogether and then trying to jump back in once you feel you've done penance.
That would be the chief frustration with the insurance industry from your perspective as a buyer.
Yeah.
So insurers really need to invest in understanding their insureds deeply so that they can build long-term partnerships that can come through loss events and facilitate recovery, rather than dropping coverage when difficulties arise and jumping back in when sentiment changes. Rob also believes a full service model, including other services such as loss prevention, could be highly beneficial for managing the complex coordination of risks of a distributed and technologically intrusive energy system. This looks like a great opportunity for a new cyber-adjacent insurance line to emerge. It's clear that the insurance industry is undergoing a profound transformation, driven by the imperative to innovate in a world facing unprecedented changes, and that the scale of the opportunity for the insurers that know how to take on this cascade of new risks is enormous. From Beazley's systematic incubation unit to the pioneering work in space and the complex evolving risks of the energy transition, the themes of client centricity and managing uncertainty through the convening power of syndicated insurance and reinsurance run right through the core of our discussion. As new technologies like AI reshape industries, they also offer new tools for insurers to better understand and quantify risks, even with relatively low sample sizes. The future of insurance seems to be one where agility, a rejuvenated why not spirit, and a deep understanding of evolving customer needs will define success. It's an exciting time to be at the forefront of this change, helping to unlock investment and build a more sustainable future. I don't know about you, but I've ended this process in a much more optimistic frame of mind than I began it. I hope you too have been able to take some inspiration and comfort from this investigation. Thank you to Adrian Cox, Neil Kempston, Denis Bensoussan, and Rob Grant for sharing their invaluable insights with us today. Thanks for listening. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, don't forget to subscribe or leave a like or a review or recommendation on whatever podcast platform you used to access this programme. These really help get the word out. Before we go, just a quick reminder that advertising slots are available here and in other places in the Voice of Insurance podcasts. Podcasting is the fastest growing medium and attracts a high quality audience of key decision makers. It's also an intimate medium where you, the listener, are right in the room with me and the interview subjects. Needless to say, that means it's a great way of getting your message out directly to an audience because you know you've got their full attention. It's also very cost effective. So get in touch with Mark at thevoiceofinsurance.com to find out how you could be speaking directly to the industry. Voice of Insurance is produced by me, Mark Gagan. Music was written by Anna Gagan and produced by Carlos Gagan. Check out more podcasts and written comment pieces at www.thevoiceofinsurance.com.